Okay, so let's say that you have completed whatever drawing that you've been working on in model space. Now it's time to add dimensions or notes, or in this case surface texture symbols. Now the main purpose of this video is to show you how to properly draw the surface texture symbols, but I want to address something before I get started with that. So I like to add dimensions, notes, surface texture symbols, or feature control frames for geometric dimensioning tolerancing in paper space or on the layout tab rather than doing it in model space. The reason why I think it's easier and it works just as well. You can add those things in model space. You know, when you add your dimensions, there's a setting that will adjust your dimensions based on the layout. You can add notes here in model space. As long as you make the text annotative, it can adjust itself to the viewport scale. But you have to be aware of what your viewport scale is, or if it's anything other than 1:1, or some things might not show up properly in your printed layout. And let me just show you what I'm talking about. So let's say that I wanted to add a note. So I'll use DT for single line text, and I'll just add the note here. Okay. Now it asks me to specify height, which is set at 0.125, which is what I want because your printed letter height should be about 1/8 of an inch, or it should be 1/8 of an inch, which is 0.125. So I'll press enter. Rotation angle 0. Okay. So now I'll just add my note here in model space. Okay. So I go back over here to the layout tab. And let me set my viewport scale at looks like 1:2 will work good for this drawing. Okay, and I'll lock my viewport, and look how small my text is, and that's exactly the height that it's going to print out. Well, since my viewport scale is 1:2 or half, then this text height is actually half of 0.125, which is what I designated over here. See, my text height over here is 0.125. But if I were to just draw a line here in paper space, just kind of next to the text, and then click on the line in the properties palette, it's 0.063. Well, it's actually exactly half of 0.125, which is 0.0625 because of my viewport scale. Now, what I can do is I could actually make that text annotative, and where it would compensate for the viewport scale. If I had a 1:2 annotative scale, which matches the viewport scale, then you can see that my paper text height is half of what my model text height should be. So I can make an adjustment right here. If I want my paper text height to be 0.125, I can change it, and then it shows up properly. Okay, to me that's just too much to think about. I could do the same thing, add DT right here, 0.125 text height, and just type it right here in paper space. Okay, and that way I don't have to worry about the viewport scale. Different places do it different ways, but I like to add everything in paper space. That's my own personal preference. So I'm going to show you how to create the surface texture symbols in paper space according to the standards set forth by the ASME Y14.36M 1996 guideline. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, again, I'm in paper space. If you see that your viewport is activated, get out of there. You want to double click outside the viewport to deactivate it. And I'm going to do this on the dimension layer. Before I get started, I want to make sure that my polar tracking increment angle is set to something that will divide into 60, because I'm going to be creating a 60-degree angle. So 15 is good. Okay, and make sure it's turned on, of course. And then my object snap settings, I want to make sure that my object snap is on, my object snap tracking is turned on, and then we're going to use the endpoint and midpoint running object snaps. So make sure at least those are checked. And then OK. So just somewhere here in space, I'm going to start off by just drawing a line straight up. Now I'm going to draw the full version that's on the left. It's in the dimensioning chapter in your text, the 14th edition technical drawing with engineering graphics book by Gasecki. You'll find it on page 387. So I'm going to draw the version on figure 1057 on the left. So I'm going to start off by drawing a vertical line by 0.375. The reason why is because the overall height of this symbol should be 3 times the letter height. And we've already talked about the letter height should be 1/8 of an inch, which is 0.125. So I'm just going to pull my crosshair straight up, type in 0.375. Then I'm going to go to the left. The horizontal member should also be 3 times the letter height. So I'll type in 0.375. Okay. Now, since we have the object snap tracking turned on, the tracking is what gives us this like an intersection, an anticipated intersection. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull over to my endpoint here, and then pull over to the left, and my angle should be 30 degrees from vertical. Okay, so 15, 30. Remember, I have an increment angle of 15 for my polar tracking. So now I have that horizontal line that's coming from the endpoint, and then I have the angled line that I want to create, which is 240. Okay, where does 240 come from? 180 all the way over here to horizontal, and then 15, 45, skip one, 30, 45, and then to 240. Okay, so I want to left click there, and this next angle should also be 30 degrees from vertical, but in the opposite direction, so 15, 30. Okay, so I can see 120, but I want to come from the midpoint there. Okay, so midpoint over, and then 120, and once I see the angled line and the horizontal line meet, I can left click. Okay, so that's how you draw that part of it. Then I can erase that that line there. So now I can use DT again for single line text, enter, and I'm just going to put the double zeros in there just like they did. I'm going to start off right above the angled line, text type 0.125 is perfect, enter, angle of rotation 0, enter, and then I'll type 0, 0, and then double click outside click outside the box, and then click escape on my keyboard. So let me just copy that over, okay, until it's approximately right there, and then copy that down. And then, you know, there's several different symbols. They show a perpendicular symbol in their example, so I'll just draw that. So I'll just start here. I'll draw this line like 0.15, and then I'll draw one from the midpoint up 0.15. Okay. Now you can, of course, that doesn't have to be perpendicular. It could be 2 parallel lines, horizontal parallel lines, or a C or an X or M and an R. Those are the different lay symbols. So that could change depending. So this is like the full version here. So what you could do is, if you saw on your assignment that you had to add these symbols here, here, and here, you could just copy, and then you could, you know, put them where they need to be, and then you can modify as needed. So if this needed to be the parallel lay symbol, you could just modify that as needed, and then you could change the numbers by just double clicking on them. I'm not sure what the numbers would be, but so on and so forth, whatever needs to show up on your assignment. Okay, so that's about as quick as way that you can do this in AutoCAD. AutoCAD Mechanical has a surface finish symbol, surface texture symbol kind of app inside of it that you can use or add on, but we don't have it in regular AutoCAD, so this is one way to do it. So I hope this helps explain some things, and that concludes this video.